play will go under review.
Welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday evening, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me on Twitter /X at @show_DeRosa. We have gotten past at least the initial craziness of free agency before the news broke out tonight of Stephon Diggs and Russell Wilson. So we could pretend that didn't happen for now. But at least for the Bills, the initial craziness of free agency has come and gone with some savvy signings being made. But there are still positions to address for this team in the draft. And I am excited to go over those in depth as this show kicks into its gears in draft season. There is a lot to cover, but I can never do something like this alone. And I wanted to bring in someone who I trust, whose work speaks for itself, who does a great job at analyzing these prospects. That is Mr. James Foster, draft analyst of the 3013. James, I appreciate you so much for tuning in, joining me tonight. How you doing? How's draft season been for you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. It's a grind, but I love it.
Yeah, man. I just offline, we were just talking, and to share the story with the people who watch, you know that this time of year is usually the busy time for tax season and accountants and tax experts alike. And I was saying that it's really the draft analysts that I think you should call it for busy season. You guys are watching hours of tape. You guys are going through it. And you mentioned offline just how many prospects you've had to cover where you're at right now. And I want to just, before we get into this a little deeper, ask you first just your overall thoughts on this class relative to last draft season to now. Maybe just how you feel about it from depth, from really the top end talent, and how much I guess you could call it variety there is in grading when you look at who's in the first round, how many first round grades you have, how much does it fluctuate from round 1 to round 2 and so on.
Yeah. So this is the weakest class in terms of top end talent that I've covered in depth. I've been doing a full 300 plus player board this is going to be my 5th year now. Mm-hmm. And the way that I do my grades is a little bit different than the NFL, where I scale them so that ideally in an average year, I will have around 28 to 32 first round grades. An individual team might have 15, but the way I look at it is I might, if there's one kind of team or one sort of scheme that I would have a player graded in the first round, I'll still give them a first round grade, even though they might have a first round grade for the Steelers, but not the Lions or whatever. So the first 4 years that I did this, I had between 25 and 29 first round grades every year. For this class, I only have 17. So definitely weaker in terms of top end talent. And there's really 3 players that I feel really confident in. They're going to be high quality starters: Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and Ashton Genty. Those are what I would say are blue chip prospects. Whereas last year I had, 10 or 11. So top end talent is definitely a step down, but then it kind of evens out when you get into the depth of the class. Second and third round, I think, are still very comparable to recent years. So it's really just kind of the blue chip talent that's lacking.
I'm glad you mentioned Ashton Genty, because as a dynasty team owner that has the first overall pick, it's music to my ears that he is one of the true starters. But I'm glad you brought that up. And it's interesting to hear you say it, because the impression I've gotten from the initial dive I've done just on relevant players to the Bills who are picking at 30 is there is just so much variety when it comes to the back half of the first round going into round 2 of people that you would deem worth a first round pick, or at least having a first round grade on. And just people that are kind of all over the place depending on team need. And it makes me think that this upcoming draft, once you get past that like initial, if in your case 17 or however many first round grades the consensus may have, it's kind of the Wild West as far as where you could expect people to go, what boards might look like, because truly there isn't someone that I see at like pick 25 when you talk about some of the more stable classes in the past at like wide receiver or edge rusher that are just knockout picks. Whereas it seems like it's more functional pieces going to that and to the second round and so on. So would you say that's kind of the vibe you get, where that round 2 has kind of a high floor where like you could find starters, but maybe not that all world elite level prospect like the 3 you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the type of player that you're going to be getting in the late first to early second. And there's honestly not a huge gap, in my opinion, between the 30th best player and the 50th best player. I think you're looking for either like high upside kind of dart throw players, or somebody that just projects as a solid, capable starter, but maybe doesn't have that elite upside.
And I guess that's in the case of the Bills. If you're a fan who has their heart set on a specific prospect, it is kind of worrisome because, again, that Wild West, that chaos that might ensue at the end of the first round, so on and so forth, it's anybody's game if you have similar positions of need, which a lot of the teams that are sitting in the back half of the 20s kind of do as far as D-line goes, maybe even in the secondary. So it is going to be equal parts concerning for me, who has some prospects on this list who he absolutely loves, despite, as we've pointed out, not being true top-end can't misses, but also kind of fun because I love the draft. I love seeing how it shakes up and just really where any of these players could go. And James, you and I very briefly spoke, and shout out to Pigskin PD and June, who hosted the morning commute space. And I heard your takes. I loved what you had to say. That's why I wanted to bring you on here. But when you and I spoke, it was really just about defensive line. And I figured that that was a good place to start from, because in my eyes, that to me is the biggest need for the Buffalo Bills. They have just a room that, outside of Ed Oliver, is either unproven in what's going to be second-year player Dwayne Carter, patchwork free agents like Larry Ogunjobi, who they just brought in for, 6 less games now, and moving on from vets. And then you have Daquan Jones, who is an older player who still has some gas in the tank, in my opinion, but not a long-term building block for this D-line. Talk to me, just in your opinion, some of the players you really like. It doesn't even have to just be for the Bills, but the players in the interior defensive line class who you think provide the most upside when it comes to pass rush or just a high ceiling as a run defender. Who do you like, James, and why?
So, after Mason Graham, who I think will probably not be on the board for the Bills, my number 2 defensive tackle is Walter Nolan. And really had a breakout year in 2024. Watched some of his 2023 tape and like over the summer, and was not that impressed back at Texas A&M, but took a major step forward this year as a pass rusher, like really in both phases. He's just kind of a disruptive wrecking ball 3 technique, lives in the backfield, extremely heavy hands and like knockback power when he makes contact with a blocker, some absolutely dominant reps, just like blowing people up at the point of attack this year. But really, really improved the skill with his hands and being able to, throw in a cross chop, use a Euro step to set up his moves, has a nice one-hand swipe. And then I thought his bull rush, like when he plays low, his bull rush is really effective. Still kind of a bit inconsistent as a pass rusher. I thought early in the year, he looked like, to me, like a top 10 pick, but kind of tailed off and was just a lot less consistent, like with hand usage and pad level with his bull rush. So I still think he's a bit of a work in progress there. And, as a run defender, it's kind of a similar story. Like he makes a ton of plays in the backfield. Pretty sure, led the SEC with 26 run stops in 2024. He is a little bit inconsistent as far as holding the point of attack, like especially against double teams. He'll get driven off the line of scrimmage by combo blocks occasionally. And so I don't think that he's going to be like ever somebody that just has a stout anchor, and is going to have like nose tackle versatility or anything.
Mhm.
He's right on that 300-pound border. So might be a little bit redundant with Ed Oliver as two guys that are kind of like slashing, penetrating three tech style of players. But he's definitely, I think, the highest grade that I have for defensive tackles outside of Mason Graham. The other guys, there's 4 other players that I have in my top 50. Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, Derek Harmon out of Oregon, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, and then Darius Alexander from Toledo. Kenneth Grant is an interesting player because he has the nose tackle frame and build, but I thought that his footwork and technique when it comes to taking on double teams was pretty awful, honestly. And like he's firmly, to me, a project player. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's a team that ends up like wanting him to drop weight and play more of a 3 technique role. I think Derek Harmon is just like a really solid. In most years, he would be a 2nd round defensive tackle. I've got him at 32 on my overall big board, so right on the borderline. A lot more disruptive than he was productive. He's pretty stiff, like when he gets deep into the pocket and he's trying to redirect and close in on the quarterback. And so had a lot of missed tackles in the backfield, but really heavy hands, good anchor. He's got a good skill set, like early in the rush as a pass rusher. I don't know if I see him being the kind of guy that has a lot of pressures, gets a really high like PFF pass rushing grade, but has 5 or 6 sacks every year,
Right.
Tyleik Williams is just one of the sturdiest run defenders in this class. I mean, I think he probably has the best anchor in this defensive tackle class. I can't remember him. I watched every game from this past season. I don't remember him ever getting put on the ground, and like rarely gets moved back. Has like 1 or 2 flashes a game as a pass rusher, but I don't see him being like high volume in that phase. And then Darius Alexander, I see it very similarly to Keanu Benton, where he's got like, quick club arm over move, and then just a devastating bull rush, some of the heaviest hands at the point of contact in this class. And, I think like for a 25-year-old player that was going up against relatively weak competition, his tape was good, but not dominant. Like wanted a little bit more. It came in flashes, but I kind of question his conditioning a little bit. Seems like he would kind of disappear for stretches. Still though, like a top 50 player when you stack together what he was able to do at the Senior Bowl to really like verify the flashes that are on his tape.
Great points on all of them. And you listed, Nolan was one I never really thought would fall to the Bills. And what you mentioned was one of the reasons why I didn't put him on my list. I just feel like there's similarities to Ed Oliver. And if I'm looking for someone, even if they have primarily played 3 tech in college, which a few of these guys have, at least in their senior year, I didn't want to just have him on because to me, it would have been like, okay, cool. You have kind of the same skill set, and in a rotational component that can be fun, but also there's more of a pressing needed who's playing opposite of Ed, because I also feel like that player, even if they have, again, mainly 3 tech experience, is the key to unlocking even more of Ed's arsenal, which is kind of like the theme I have going into IDL for the Bills this year. But you listed really the guys I love, and I'll start with Darius Alexander to pitch it back, because the real lone question I have about him, where one you mentioned, which is kind of, can he be an every down DT? Because he has serious size, at least, looking at his RAS profile, which I had him at 6'3", 305. He has the size. He's a little bit lighter than, your heaviest 1 tech, but he has the capability, in my opinion, to play that position and really anchor there. And then I've also seen some alignment versatility from him where you can get him out wide if you really wanted to. Granted, I don't know how consistent that would be at the pro level, but I think really also I've seen people talk about age with him. It's not really a concern for me, because even though he might be a little bit of an older prospect, if that prospect has the higher floor because he's gotten more time to play, I'm totally fine with it. And it's really just a matter of, is that competition that you faced, are you still able to translate to the pro level where, okay, it's more ramped up, but you still have the skill set and you can still compete? Derek Harmon, to me, if he's there at 30, I'd be ecstatic if they went for him. I love Derek Harmon. I think the chaos, the havoc he brings to the line is just something that really pops off when you watch him consistently. You brought up, though, the fact that, it's a lot of pressures and not maybe as much production, because it almost seems like he's shot out of a cannon to a fault where he gets in the backfield, but he'll just glide right past the target. And you're kind of like, all right, man, just slow it down a hair and we'll be okay. And we could do more. But I like him a lot. I like what he brings as a pass rusher. I like the tenacity he plays with as a run defender. And he seems like an ideal fit. And just whether it's the Bills or not, a solid prospect that you could have as a 3 tech, but someone that I think has enough aggression and enough strength to be able to play one if you wanted to kick him over there or if you wanted to move him around, however you saw it. Grant, you mentioned a very polarizing player just for the size he brings and how much burst he can show. But yes, there are deficiencies in his game, certainly. For me, I find that I can see the vision of him truly developing as a stable run defender. I have more concern of if he's just a 2-down guy, even when he does develop, though, because that aggression is great, but also with how much work he needs, is he going to be able to maintain balance and play with enough consistent technique at the pro level too? And Tyreek Williams, Mr. Unsexy, not because this is not a looks thing. It's more so just the fact that he is a solid run defender. And when you watch him more extensively, it's like, can you actually ask this guy to become a more stable pass rusher? And can that actually be something that if he works on it more, becomes effective enough to justify keeping him on the field? But for me, even having him as a 2-down player, I really like him. I think he provides you insane amounts of stability. The role would be defined. He'd be able to stop the run consistently at the pro level. And if you get actual development as a pass rusher, a lot of fun and something I could see the Bills doing in the second round, most likely. But I'm going to flip it back to you, James. We talked about some of the top end guys, maybe rounds 2, 3, or even beyond. Do you have any guys you really like that you feel might either be slept on or just someone that you think deserves a little more love and has a defined role at the pro level?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's an incredibly deep class. I've got 14 defensive linemen in my top 100. So like I could sit here for an hour and just list off names, but some more under the radar guys. I think Vernon Broughton out of Texas, a player that I actually just watched like this week. Really late getting to him, but like he's 169 on the consensus board. I feel like he's a lock to go in the top 75. 6'5", 311 pounds, 35-inch arms, just has really like an elite frame for a defensive tackle. And, I think that he is I think he gives you a good balance of like being a pass rush first DT, but still being very sturdy in the run game. So like he has some of the best hands in this defensive tackle class, just really active and coordinated with his hands, has a lot of different moves. Like he's got a club rip, a swipe swim, two-handed swipe. He's got a spin counter and then a really good long arm, like uses that arm length to his advantage and, really like centralizes his power, pries open the pocket. So I think you combine his technical savvy with his ability to spring off the line of scrimmage. He's got good edge-to-edge quickness to get the angle into the pocket. Really like what he can bring to the table as a pass rusher. He isn't a dominant run defender, and like double teams, sometimes he will get driven off the line. He's kind of got like a weird build where it's like kind of a thin lower half, it looks like. But against single blocks, does a very good job with his hands. He can shed blocks quickly. I think that Vernon Broughton's a guy that's not getting a lot of attention, but to me is a lock to be a day 2 pick, and I think will be a really good player. I see like the high end comp for him as Christian Barmore.
Wow.
Just is kind of they look almost identical on tape, where they're like, it's just like freakishly long arms for their build, and they use a lot of the same moves. I think that he's not really under the radar, but like another guy on that Texas defensive line, if you wanted to lean more run defense, would be Alfred Collins. who doesn't give you much as a pass rusher, but I mean, 6'5.5", 332 pounds, almost 35-inch arms as well. And I think he's probably the first or second best run defender in this class. It's between him and Tyleik Williams, just an absolutely dominant block shedder. So he's somebody that's just going to immediately upgrade your run defense. The last guy that I would mention is CJ West out of Indiana, who is kind of like a dynamic nose tackle. You know, he single-handedly really led Indiana to having one of the best run defenses in college football last year. He's got that stout build, 6'1", 316 pounds, pretty short arms, but you know, really quick knifing into gaps. Has a lot of pass rushing skills where like he's not going to be a guy that leads your team in pressures or anything, but he, I think, can be a 3-down player, and on early downs, like he can, you know, play the run first and then quickly transition into his pass rush when he reads his keys. He's got cross chop, swipe, club swim, just really quick and powerful hands. So I like CJ West. I think a balanced player that's going to be a positive impact in both phases.
Love those takes. Love the analysis. And I actually wanted to pitch a couple more because I had a few names on this list that I do like, but I'm interested to hear your take on them. And the first one I want to bring up is Jordan Phillips from Maryland, because, you know, it was kind of the same thing when I saw West. They have similar size profiles. I think you got Phillips at 6'1", 312 right now. But, you know, he has plenty of juice, but feels like someone who truly is a developmental player. What are your thoughts on him? And then I have one more name after that I just a little more polarizing, but we'll get to him.
Yeah, I really like Jordan Phillips. I have him 93 on my board. And, you know, he is just like a densely packed, like ball of energy, like the explosiveness, not like he's explosive off the line of scrimmage, but the way that he can explode into contact with the hand pop, he just like rattles his opponent's pads when he makes contact. And, like, you know, he's got that the quickness to shoot into gaps. There's so many plays where like he gets a TFL just from using like a swim or an arm over to kind of slice against the flow of the run. He is definitely a developmental pass rusher, but you know, I say that not that, like, you know, some players that just don't offer anything as a pass rusher, you might say they're developmental. Jordan Phillips is developmental in the sense that he's shown a lot of promise on tape. He just hasn't really put it all together. Doesn't have a career sack, only had 13 pressures in 2024. It's kind of misleading because like he is almost never being asked to just fire off the snap and rush the passer. Like he's always read stepping, playing the run first. Anytime that he rushes the passer and is able to actually like get into a move, he has to start that, you know, a second or two into the play when he, you know, realizes that it's not a run. So like he wasn't really given the opportunity to be that productive as a pass rusher, but I think he has a really nice pass rushing plan in development. Like he wins with a cross chop. He has an incredible spin move for his size. The hand pop and the power that he shows into contact, that translates to his bull rush as well. And he had some dominant reps where he just would like flatten the center. So yeah, I mean, it's not somebody that I think day one is going to be ready to be super productive, but I think he's kind of like Mozzie Smith, what we thought Mozzie Smith was going to be. Like, obviously he's been awful in the NFL, but like as kind of that densely packed, just really powerful nose tackle that also has pass rushing upside. That's what I see Jordan Phillips as. And, you know, True Jr., who declared at like he won't even be 21 years old when he gets drafted. There's going to be a team, I think, that really likes him and spends a day two pick on him. He was also dominant at the Shrine Bowl as well. Like he was probably the best pass rusher there.
all I saw was his name pop off and just different clips of him showing out there. And it was really cool to see, as a fan of a team that had another DT named Jordan Phillips that
Yep.
wouldn't mind a swap of them. That would be a lot of fun. And, that again, great insight. And there are plenty of players that I think are options, viable options for the Bills. There's one I highlight, that our guys here on the network, Eric and Ann, have gone over and have been fans of, but Josh Farmer, who I really like because I feel like that I quoted it as saying like he has a Bills 1T build because a big thing for them is they're not going to typically don't go for the true 330 or super heavy guy. Maybe that changes this year, but Josh Farmer just off the line is a lot of fun. I think he has a fun bull rush, good first step. He's just someone that needs a deeper bag, but in the case of just plugging the hole, creating havoc, I think he could still have success on day one with that and build off that, especially in a rotation with Daquan Jones. But the one I wanted to bring up to you is just someone that I've loved, and I know all the red flags are there. I'm cognizant of it. I know that this is someone that I'm literally just I draft crush on just for the sake of the frame. But Deion Walker, who I'm listing as IDL. Granted, I know he can go all over the line. I know there's plenty of concerns over how low he can get and whether he can maintain that, whether he could play with kind of a stable anchor off the line, because someone of his size, you would expect to win more, but he can get blown off the ball at times. And I know he was playing with the injured back. So there's just a lot going on with this prospect that I'm really interested to hear your take on, just given the fact of that frame of 6'7", 331 is crazy.
Yeah, Deion Walker is probably somebody that I would just let another team take. Like, I don't. If I was a GM, I don't see myself being willing to like spend as high of a pick on him that I think you'd probably have to. And like, I've got him like well out of my top 100. He's 136 on my board, and the frame I think is really impressive, but to me, like his height is, if you read like a Deion Walker scouting report, pretty much the first thing in the strength section is always going to be like, he's 6'7" and all this. Like, to me, that is such a negative and limiting factor for him, in the sense that he can't play with low enough pad level to anchor or to really generate much push as a power rusher. And the back injury, I think would definitely explain some of the rough tape that he had this year. For me, like, I would need to hear more confirmation than just kind of his agent like putting out that he had an injury, to like to massively shift my opinion or anything. And I thought even last year, like in 2023, his tape was definitely better, but there were still a lot of the same concerns, where like I was never on board with the top 10 hype. So yeah, I mean, if you can get him on day 3, I think there's obviously a lot of upside there that the injury was playing a huge role in his tape not being as good this year. But for me, I would just let another team take him.
That is a great saying that I think I'm going to start reciting if it's someone I'm not a fan of. Let another team take him. I've been a fan of the prospect just since last year because I was a fan of the traits, and I'm also someone who knows that his GM is a traits-based GM. That's not everyone he'll take, but he does like freak athletes or freak prospects. It's why I feel like I'm praying they don't reach on like a Landon Jackson or something like that. Not because I don't like the player, but because if Brandon Beane sees 6'6" with long arms, I feel like that's all he needed to see. And I'm like, please, let's not do that. But Deion Walker I was in the hype and I liked him. And I liked the fact that he lined up in multiple spots with that frame. And I was kind of wondering what senior year would be like for him, because if he does get lower and he does have that explosiveness and can kind of get to a level of like a shorter DT who has a lower center of gravity, but playing with that big frame and then pairing the strength, that would have been something that I thought would have been a huge positive. It wasn't all put together. And I do wonder, like you alluded to, like how much did the back injury affect him? How valid was it? And if it really was that impactful, what does it look like if he gets to the right team that can develop him, get him to try at the very least and play a bit lower? And what does that look like once that happens? I mean, or if it happens. And that's why for me, if it's the 4th round and the Bills have an abundance of day 3 picks and he's there, I'm cool with it just because I know that's not taken by design of throwing him into the Wolves right away as a starter. This is
Right.
definitely a guy you got to develop. But those traits, at least the size profile, it can be damning. But if you can get him to play to that level, I think that's like unlocking a key. But it takes the right team. It takes the right development curve. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with it. And I do agree. It would be like if you took him day 2 in the second round, it'd be like, okay, like once upon a time, like 2023, before I knew better, I'd be all ecstatic. Now I'm kind of like, I don't know about that one, but great points on these players. And I want to take it to the next group that I think is what I would deem the second biggest need for the Bills, and that's corner. They have Christian Benford. We're still waiting to hear on if they can lock down an extension with him. They just traded Kyer Elam. Rasul Douglas is still a free agent. That room outside of Jamarcus Ingram and the backup Cam Lewis is barren. And in my opinion, it seems likely that the Bills will probably go for 2 prospects. And this is a nice corner class, at least from what I've been able to see. And I have a good amount on here that I really like. But turning it back to you, James, the cornerback class, who do you really like? And what do you think are the best traits about these prospects?
Yeah, man. It's been disappointing. Azareye'h Thomas out of Florida State has been one of my guys like since week 5 of the season. When I first watched him, I immediately like gave him a really high first round grade, but reportedly ran between like 4.55 and 4.6, which is like, cornerback with 40-yard dash is kind of the one position where I have to just take a hard line. And like, there's it's really hard to like be a good corner if you don't have a good 40 time, unfortunately. So in my next update, probably going to have him fall a little bit. Like he's 14 on my board right now, but I think probably somebody that should be in the late 20s to early 30s. I think that, so I've got 11 corners in my top 100, and a lot like it's a much worse cornerback class than I expected heading into the season, because there's a lot of players that either got injured or had disappointing years. Obviously like Savon Revel tearing his ACL. I've got him 36 on my board. I think he can be like really good in a press man or cover 3 type of system, but unfortunate that he didn't get to play out that last year and kind of just have another year of tape to prove himself, given that the level of competition that he's facing is not great. I think that, Will Johnson is a player that I've been a lot lower on really since I watched him last year. I just I don't think like he has the speed really for a man coverage heavy system, and I think that he kind of exacerbates that issue by being so aggressive, biting on double moves, and just ends up getting beat over the top a lot. So I have him 26 on my board, and and like it's not a prospect fatigue type of deal really at all, because he's had pretty much the same grade since the summer. Max Hairston, I've got at 40. I think that there's so much upside with him. I'm not sure about like his physicality and hand usage in press coverage, but playing off the receiver with some cushion and just being able to have eyes on the quarterback, shoot into passing lanes, I think he can be a really dynamic playmaker. And then the other guy in my top 50 is Jahdae Barron, who I've got at 49. And he's another player that just like the hype for him as a top 15 or even top 10 pick kind of makes no sense to me based on his tape. Like, he's really good at the catch point. He's a good tackler, has versatility to play multiple positions, and I think he's a smart player. But when you watch Texas's defense and you watch Jahdae Barron, he is almost never playing man coverage. He's never playing press. Pretty much every rep is in a side turn, like doesn't have really any experience even being squared up with the receiver. So I think like the vulnerability of what he was asked to do is so much less compared to other players in this class, where even though he was really productive, I don't know that I see like first round traits with Barron. So it's like a lot of the guys in my top 50, I just kind of, I have them ranked highly, but I have them ranked lower than where kind of the consensus is. And I think they'll probably get drafted a bit earlier than where I'm comfortable with. When you get into like guys in my 50 to 100 range, like Jacob Parrish, Darian Porter, Dorian Strong, that's where I think you can really find value. Also, like guys like Zoff Frazier, if you can get him like third, fourth round. So I think there's still a lot of interesting depth and like sleepers in this class.
Definitely. And I think at pick 30, there's going to be an abundance of options if the Bills want to go that route. There's one that if I recall correctly, I don't think you were as high on as I am, and a lot of Bills fans are, but that's Trey Amos. Like, he is a player that I think has the ability to play well in both zone and both man with good instincts, kind of like ball. And correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I had this misunderstood. I think he has the ability to man up pretty well, but he has also that kind of timing, that processing to jump routes if need be. And I think when you talk about the Bills that might trend to a more man-heavy defense this year, just, with crumbs of information that they've given us to kind of allude to the fact that that'll happen with coaching decisions and some of the personnel they've brought on. I think he's the type of player, especially just looking at his measurables, that I would be comfortable with them drafting, just because, again, to shore up a CB2 spot, if you trust Benford as the CB1, I want someone that has the versatility, but you're also not depending on him to really, truly reach his ceiling yet. And he just seems like the safest prospect, and I really like him. So I know you mentioned the other ones that you talked about, Barron, who I think Barron is a player that people, when they hype him up, it's really for the what could be, which, again, that's really any prospect, but especially with him, because I know that he had a lot of experience playing as a slot guy, and, man needs refinement. And those are all traits that I think he can do just given his athleticism, but really you got to see it. So it's like, are you willing to hedge your bets on that early, or do you want to just maybe let another team develop him and we'll go for a more quote unquote sure thing? But yeah, I just wanted to get your opinion on Amos, because again, that's a name a lot of the fans love, a name that I really like, but curious what you think.
Yeah, I do really like Trey Amos. I think first round is a little rich for him, which is like where I've seen him go sometimes, but I think he's one of the smartest corners in this class in zone coverage. Like his ability to, read route concepts, peel off of his initial assignment, whether it's in, cover 3 or like playing a high-low as the flat defender in cover 2. I just think his field vision, his awareness is exactly what you're looking for in that scheme. He has really long arms, which makes him a weapon at the line of scrimmage and at the catch point. I still think in press coverage, he's kind of somebody that just like catches the receiver off the line of scrimmage, and like at his level of competition that ended up still being pretty effective, but he's not really like striking from a balanced platform and like playing with the level of technique that I think he'll have to. For me, what my biggest hang up with Trey Amos is that I think he has pretty tight hips. And so I would worry about him in like a true press man scheme. He is just like on comebacks and stop routes. He has major difficulties decelerating and sinking his hips to stay with those guys. So like he has enough speed to keep up with receivers on the vertical plane, but they can just kind of get him leaning downfield and then snap off that route. And he allows a lot of separation, and just like in and out of breaks, I feel like his transitions are a little bit clunky, and it really has to grab at the jersey at the top of the route to stick with guys. And I'm not sure. Let's see how many penalties. So he only had 3 penalties last year, but I was watching his tape, and like normally I'm not the kind of guy that normally I'm anti penalties. Like I'm not somebody that's going to like complain about that. But I was watching Trey Amos, and I felt like he should have been called for a lot more, because he's just kind of doesn't really understand when he needs to release contact. And I know college and pro have different rules. So yeah, I'm not as comfortable with him in a man heavy scheme, but I think like press cover 3, I think he could be a star corner, because there's so much potential at the line of scrimmage as a press guy, and then just like so smart reading route concepts.
Yeah. We'll make the handle, instead of no flags film in the case of Trey Amos, we'll call it some flags, maybe like should be more flags film. But I great points. And for me, I'm comfortable living in that world just for the fact that while they are going to increase their man rate, I don't think it's going to be this exponentially drastic change, just a slight uptick where maybe you're going to get him in some press man looks, but it's probably going to be still zone coverage most of the time. And I'm more than happy to have this type of player there. And I guess just, because you mentioned Darian Porter briefly and kind of him on the outside, but any other prospects you want to talk about on my list here? I mentioned, just for players I like, Kobe Bryant, Benjamin Morrison, Noel Williams, and Zy Alexander as some players that I think might be, at least have traits that could work in the Bills defense. But these players, or anyone that we might not have mentioned that you also like, for anyone really beyond just the Bills.
Yeah, I'll just quickly run through a couple guys. Like Darian Porter, I think has the best speed in this class, at least on tape. I mean, ran an incredible 40 time, but he's somebody that just has no issues at all covering receivers down the sideline, keeps up with them step for step. And then you can tell that he's a former receiver, the way that he's able to turn and locate the ball. He's a difficult evaluation because he has it's such a small sample size of tape. Really wasn't able to see the field until this year, and he was kind of a rotational player. He might play 20 or 30 snaps a game, so there's just not a whole lot to evaluate, but definitely think somebody's going to take him on day 2. You mentioned Noel Williams. I've got him as cornerback 13, 127 on my board. Really like a lot of stuff on his tape, just incredible physicality and competitiveness. Yep. Obviously extremely productive in 2024 with 7 interceptions, 9 pass breakups. He is I wrote in his scouting report, he plays with a completely random level of composure and technique from snap to snap. There are textbook reps on his tape, and then the very next play, he'll just kind of, be undisciplined with his hips, get carved up by a press release. And so it's really erratic levels of play. But I think he's one of those guys, you've heard Matt Harmon for reception perception. He kind of coined the term sacrificial X receiver, as a guy that's just going to take a bunch of press man snaps as the X. Noel Williams is kind of the cornerback version of that, where he's just somebody that can live on an island and press man and give you 600 press man reps in a season. And he'll give up some plays. He'll have 13 pass breakups, might allow 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. It's going to be pretty up and down, but he can just hang in there kind of. That's how I see Noel Williams. So really like him. It's just, there's some inconsistencies that hold me back from seeing him as a day 2 guy. And who are the other players you mentioned?
I had Benjamin Morrison, Kobe Bryant, Zy Alexander.
Yeah, Ben Morrison. He's a tough player. The injury is really concerning to me. I don't have any insight to that, but a hip injury for a corner is pretty much the most. That's pretty much the worst injury that you can have. So got to see how that affects his draft stock. I really like him. Played one of these guys that just played on an island almost exclusively in press man for his college career. And I think he's really good at the line of scrimmage and sticking with routes on the vertical plane. I think he would be really good in a cover 3 system because he has good speed. He can open his hips and run down the sideline pretty efficiently. He has a major issue with letting people cross his face on quick slants, fake an outside release, and then separate inside against his leverage. And that was something that it's really specific, but you saw it happen over and over again on his tape for the last couple years. And then also kind of has shorter arms, isn't the strongest player. And you see a lot of times at the catch point, he just he might be in good position, but just doesn't have that extra reach to dislodge the ball. I have him with a late 3rd round grade. He's 94th on my board, and that is partially influenced by the injury. If it was a completely clean medical deal, I'd probably have him like 60s or 70s would be my guess. And then Kobe Bryant just has electric tape. One of my favorite players to watch. The definition of a ball hawk. I think that he is like, his size is obviously a concern. 6 foot 180, really slender build, but he has really long arms. And I think he plays with enough physicality to offset that in the run game, especially like just really tenacious when it comes to crashing downhill, defending screens and outside runs. And I think he's somebody that would be a better scheme fit for like the traditional Bills coverage scheme than like a really heavy man scheme, because I think speed and fluidity are closer to average with him. But, just his awareness in zone coverage can be really disruptive at the line of scrimmage. And then his ball skills, he's somebody that I would definitely be targeting early day 3.
Yeah, I really like him, and all those points you made. When you watch him extensively, there's just this different level of aggression that he plays with, whether it's mentally or physically. And I think that even if it's something where the Bills maybe up their man rate, I still think, like I said, it'll be enough of a balance where I can live in a world where any of these guys that might have stemmed from one system more than the other, like Hairston being more of his own guy, but some other guy being more of a man guy, it's something that I still think will benefit their room. And he's a player I really love. And then the last one, Zy Alexander, is just someone that I felt like has like that floor you can work with, where I feel like he's a stable corner. I don't think he's going to be incredibly flashy, but I think when they draft their corners, they want him to kind of be able to wear a lot of hats, especially in run defense right away. And he seems like a pretty sure run defender, at least right now, and someone that I think could blossom a little more as he gets further into the pros. But otherwise, I mean, you nailed every one on my list. I got no one else to really bring up. So I appreciate that insight. I'm really excited to see what the group does in the pros and whoever the Bills decide to take. I want to move on now just to defensive end. Again, another position of need I think the Bills have. Granted, you can see my tagline. They just recently got Joey Bosa and still have Greg Rousseau, but Epeneza's on an expiring deal. That Bosa is just a 1-year deal. Outside of it is really Javon Solomon, Michael Hoyt, and there's going to be holes that they have to address. And this is a class that has edge rushing talent. So I'm interested in your opinion on just some players you really like, James, for any team, and who shines to you.
Yeah, this is very similar to defensive tackle. It's an incredibly deep edge class. I've got 16 guys in my top 100. I have 9 players in my top 50. When it comes to the 30th pick, I would be looking at Donovan Izaraku out of Boston College and Braden Swinson out of LSU. Those are kind of the 2 guys that I think would be in range that makes sense for the Bills. If Michael Williams or Shamar Stewart end up falling there, would prefer either of those 2 players. But, Izaraku is kind of actually like similar to Javon Solomon in terms of his build. And I love that build for edge rushers and defensive linemen, where he's short, but he has really long arms. So he's got the natural leverage, but doesn't have like the short arms that normally come with being undersized. He has, I think, arguably the best bend in this class, and he's got the best cross chop. I mean, has like, if I were to make a reel of like all of his cross chop wins, it would probably be 30 or 40 plays long this past year. And really just incredibly productive in both phases. Led the Power 4 in sacks and run stops. He has a simple pass rushing plan, but it's really effective. He's kind of just alternating from the cross chop into an inside counter, just like spamming those back and forth, and really made him like unblockable on a 2-way go. Like the ACC tackles that he was facing could not mirror him. the one thing that holds me back with Iziraku, who I really like as a prospect, but what holds me back from giving him like a top 10 grade is that he cannot win with power. He had a dominant bull rush rep against, I think, Old Dominion or like one of the lower level teams that they played, but really like against ACC tackles was not able to push them back at all. And so I think he could kind of end up getting boxed into a Harold Landry type of role, where like really all he has is speed and ends up as kind of a one-dimensional player. But I think what he can do at a high level is pretty dynamic. And then Braden Swinson, I think, is one of the most underrated players in this class. Led the SEC in pressures 60 in 2024. He can win with speed. He can win with power, and he can win with inside counters. He can attack tackles on all three levels. He's explosive. He's fluid. He's quick. I just think he's somebody that checks every box as far as what plays at the next level. And I've heard like some off the field stuff as far as like football character. Like he was supposed to go to the Shrine Bowl and ended up backing out of that. So there could be some weird stuff like that I don't really have too much insight into that's causes him to fall. But purely based on the tape, I think he's a top 32 player for me. And, somebody that can just be a consistent, like high end number 2 pass rusher.
Yeah, and I like Swinson a lot. I like Iziraku too. I think both are viable options. Again, I refer to him as Donovan because I'll probably trip over his last name if I say it 3 times in a row. I don't want to botch it. But I like the pass rush bag he has. Like, guys in the film room in our network have covered this extensively too. But he's someone that's a bit savvy. And I think that's something you could really really for any defensive structure galvanize if you have a variety of moves. Again, whether it's playing with power, which you said he struggles with, but whether it's being able to kind of use your arms effectively or use your hands effectively, if you have a plan and have different weapons in your arsenal, that to me is something that really can be built off of effectively. And for the Bills edge rushers that have typically been, at least in years past, the profile they've gone for is kind of having length, having the ability to use your arms and kind of go for those stabs, power moves with your arms. Even if he doesn't have the true strength, I would like the idea of them kind of building upon what they did with Solomon last year and going for the long-armed guy that is a bit versatile too. And therefore, if you do actually develop the power with his rush, that could be something that lends itself really well for your edge rushing group. And, you hit the nail on the head with Swinson, who's someone that I think, as the discourse has kind of gone on since the start of draft season, I've seen his stock rise. But to hear him kind of mentioned for the back half of round 1 is interesting. I do wonder if he does get taken at any point there. There's one player on here. There's a ton of edge rushers I've listed, but for the sake of time, I won't get into all of them. But guys like, Landon Jackson, Princely, Nick Scarleton, like these are options that I also really like for the Bills and think have positives, but also some refinement to work on. But there's one player that I really like, and I'm curious what your take is on him, James, and that's Jordan Birch out of Oregon. I like the frame he has. I think he's an athletic freak. I think his burst off the line is a lot of fun. I think he is violent with his hands and can win in a lot of ways with power or with using them. What do you think about Jordan Birch? Do you think he's a byproduct maybe of some havoc that was created from other D linemen like a Derek Harmon, like a Jamari Caldwell, or do you think that this is a true stout edge rusher in the NFL?
I really like Jordan Birch. I think that I would say top 4 power rusher in this class. Like my top 4 power rushers would be in no order: Jordan Birch, Elijah Roberts out of SMU, Ashton Gelati out of Louisville, and then David Walker out of Central Arkansas. I think those are the 4 best speed to power guys in this class. Jordan Birch is, he's got the length. He has, 6'4", 280 pounds. Like not an elite explosive athlete, but does a really good job of exploding into contact and, having a lot of, like hand pop and just strike power when he makes contact. He had an incredible rep against Ohio State where just like folded the right tackle back into the pocket. But then he can also win the corner with a cross chop. He's got a really good bend for his size. He flashed kind of a spin move. I think took a major step forward this year in terms of his pass rushing, because I remember watching him last year and was just not impressed at all. Like, did not see anything in terms of an NFL caliber pass rusher. And, can't say enough about the steps that he took this year. Should be a much more productive and disruptive run defender for his size. He had only had 5 run stops in 2024. He doesn't get pushed back or anything, holds his ground pretty effectively, but, want to see him make more plays in the backfield. But yeah, I do really like Jordan Birch as a second or third round pick.
And I am perfectly comfortable if they want to bank on athleticism for a pass rusher and have the run development come after that. That would be a fun world to live in, because I love this prospect. There's a few other on here too that I'm fans of, but I feel a little more limited, like Jack Sawyer, who I think is he's fun, but it sounds a little kind of ridiculous to say this, but if he doesn't have the strip sack recovery in that playoff game, how hyped is he going to be? Is he truly above just that moment? Because to me, he felt a little one-dimensional, despite being someone that hasn't off. Because now that I'm saying this, James, they're going to draft him, so it's going to bite me. But he plays with a lot of intensity, a lot of aggression. The motor never goes away, and I love that about him. But that's him and JT are players that I feel are positives for a D-line, but I don't really trust the expansion of what you see from them now, almost like their floor is high, but it's also at the ceiling. How do you feel about the OSU edge rushers? Am I off base here, or you feel a little similar? What's your take?
Yeah, so I'm probably about as low on Jack Sawyer as you'll see with anyone. I've got him as edge 23, and he's still 146 on my board. I don't really see NFL traits with him in terms of explosiveness, bend, length. He's a solid high effort run defender, but he'll still get put on his back. He's got a kind of thin lower half and has some issues anchoring, and then the lack of length makes it difficult for him to shed blocks consistently. I don't really see him as a high level, starting caliber defensive end, but could be a rotational contributor, I think. JT Tuimoloau is definitely I'm also a bit lower on him, but he at least I think has brings some NFL traits to the table in terms of his length and size. He's an outstanding run defender, really evenly dispersed build, and just I think going to be a rock solid player on early downs. He's got good power to push the pocket. He has a really layered and diverse pass rushing plan with a lot of different moves that he can throw at you. He just doesn't quite have the explosiveness and bend to win the corner consistently. And so I don't think ideally he's going to be somebody that you have on the field, on third downs, trying to beat tackles around the outside shoulder. But I do think he's a starting caliber player who should, at least on early downs, be a solid contributor. And I've got a 4th round grade on him, but I wouldn't hate him in the 3rd round at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do wonder if he even makes it to the Bills at that point. But I'm looking at it from the lens of, when you have Epineza, I think would probably walk next season unless you get him for a reasonable contract. You want to find someone who kind of replicates the role. I don't know if they're going to replicate the frame, because obviously Epineza just has crazy length and is a bigger prospect, player now, was a bigger prospect. So I wonder if they would go a different route or find a more prototypical, versatile edge rusher that might not have that size, but could still bring those positive traits in run defense. And this might be an option for them if he does manage to fall. But I'm still just not high on really either one. Again, that line felt like it, you had Tyreek Williams, who was the stout run defender. Then you have these 2 edge rushers that kind of feast, but also when it comes to just being a power rusher in college football, I feel like that can get you somewhere. But once you get to the NFL, where more variety is, I don't want to say needed, but definitely preferred, and you start boxing yourself into one thing, you're probably not going to comfortably live in that world as someone who sees the field often beyond special teams, or just sees beyond more than a rotational role. So I feel a little more validated, because that was my concern. And just real fast, David Walker, he's so much fun. He's so much fun.
Awesome.
I don't think the Bills take him, just because, again, Solomon, to me, he occupies, unless they move on from him, he occupies this specific role as just true pass rush specialist. And I'm really excited to see what year 2 of Javon Solomon looks like in that defense. But if they didn't have him and it was like round 4 and he was there, I'd be pounding the table for him. He's just like, I can't even describe it other than vicious. Like that's the thing I think of when I think
he's
of
a Brandon Graham clone to me.
And he's just like playing that at 6 foot. What I saw was 6 foot 263. I don't know if the weight is different from more recent updates, because I think I had this down like a few weeks back. But he's just a fun player. He's going to be like that rotational component that's just going to feast when you get him in a true pass rush down. And if the Bills did do it, like, would I think it's a little redundant just given the room? Sure, but I'd be hyped. Like he's just such a cool player. But again, just great points made on these players. And I want to move on to just what I would deem the final major position group, because there's cases to be made for the Bills about finding their third tight end, maybe even a running back successor for James Cook. A lot of people still pound for receiver, although I'm not so much in that camp anymore after the Palmer signing, but safety. And I think that right now this Bills room has 2 established starters in Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop going into year 2. And I think that they want a versatile player, one that can play close to the line, but one that also has that deep half experience, or even could play center fielder if they run more cover 1. In the case of safety, James, what's your take on this class and really some of the mid-round guys? Because it seems like, just from my take, a lot of these safeties are going to be really living in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round, at least the top of the group.
Yeah, the guys that I would be targeting for the Buffalo Bills, I think there are 2 guys that I really love the fit for the Bills. Jonas Sanker out of Virginia and RJ Mickens out of Clemson. So like you've got the top guys, Nicky Manwari, Malachi Starks. I think Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State has been forgotten about, but he's an awesome player. And then Xavier Watts. Winston and Watts could definitely be in play, but I think, what Sanker and Mickens can give you as far as the ability to play single high, but then also just being a really versatile kind of movable piece on the back end is really appealing. So Sanker is 6 foot, 206 pounds, almost 33-inch arms, ran a 4.48 in the 40-yard dash, had a 92nd percentile 10-yard split. He's like a downhill robber, crash on in breaking routes over the middle type of safety, but like has the speed to keep up with vertical threats from the slot. He can play a little bit of single high, incredibly productive as a run defender, an underneath screen, like patrol guy, led FBS defensive backs with 173 solo tackles since 2023. And that's not him. Like I'm never the kind of guy that's going to like use tackles as a stat for defensive backs really, but that's not him like getting beat and making the tackle. It's him making a lot of plays on the line of scrimmage. Does a great job of using his length to play the ball and not the receiver, and like rake the ball out at the catch point. Didn't have a single penalty in 2024. I just think he's like a physical downhill presence, but also has the back end athleticism that you want to be able to play multiple positions. And then RJ Mickens out of Clemson is somebody who I was really late getting to, just watching him a couple of days ago, really like based on his combine performance, but he's been a 4-year contributor for Clemson and has a ton of experience. He's 6 foot, 199 pounds, 32.5-inch arms. So really good length. And he's kind of like, he played a lot more as a box safety in Clemson's defense, like has experience everywhere, but you saw a lot of his best plays defending routes from the 10 to 20 yard range. Like he makes some incredible reads on the ball as a robber safety. I think, he ran a 4.49, had a 41.5-inch vertical. He's got the athleticism to like cover ground and play as a single high safety. There's just not a lot of experience, in deep zone coverage. So I don't know exactly what his eyes are like and like, his instincts and that sort of thing, but good tackler, good run defender. Well, he's a good tackler. I think the one thing that was most disappointing about his tape is when I see a safety with really long arms, obviously it's important because they can play into passing lanes, but I like that because it means they can shed blocks at the second level when they're playing as a box safety. And that was my biggest hang up, is that you just didn't see the physicality playing off of blocks. So want to see a step forward there. But outside of that, I think he's an extremely well-rounded player, and somebody that's not getting a ton of hype right now, but I would guess he's probably a 4th round pick. Could easily see him sneaking into the 3rd round.
I'd be for it. He wasn't even on my radar, and I appreciate you giving me the kind of rundown on him, because I definitely want to go watch him now. Looking at the rest of the list, I mean, you covered some of the names, and I did have Senker on here. There's one player who I did like that I originally wasn't really considering, but I do like just the way he lined up, some of his experience, and that's Lathan Ransom. I think he's a player that, has that mix of both. He's lined up closer to the line. He's been a little bit back, but he kind of plays with what I would deem is a lot of, athleticism, a lot of good coverage ability, someone that I think positions himself well. I'm curious about your thoughts of this player too, because to me, at least just what I've been able to watch of him, I could see him slotting in and being a part of that rotation of safeties, whether they want to align him in kind of a set, split half look, or if they want to send him deeper. What do you think about this player? Do you think he's a fit? If not, where do you see him fitting?
Yeah, so I have a 5th round grade on Lathan Ransom, and just based on the guys we're talking about, it seems like I'm an Ohio State hater. I promise there are Ohio State prospects that I really like, but I view him as kind of purely a box safety. I think his straight line speed is adequate. I just didn't see great coverage instincts. It kind of seems like he needs to really see something clearly before he breaks, and that shows up with, like, he really doesn't have a lot of ball production. I think just 2 picks, 2 pass breakups over the last 2 seasons. But he's a tone setting, just like physical demeanor as a run defender. He had a play. I don't know if you watched the Oregon playoff game, but he had a tackle on Jordan James that just like set the tone for the entire game. Had a wide open runway down the field and just like flattened him for a 2-yard gain or whatever. And like, I remember watching that game live, and I think it was only 7-0 at that point, but that play kind of told me how the game was going to go. So yeah, I mean, I think he's a decent player. Like, he can play a little bit of man coverage. Like I said, he's got enough speed. He can shed blocks, but as far as back end coverage, instincts and range, I'm not sure he's a guy that I would be targeting super highly. But like a couple other guys that I would mention that I think are intriguing kind of mid-round options, Andrew Mukaba out of Texas and Jalen Reed out of Penn State, I think are really interesting players.
Yeah, Mukaba is so much fun. He is just I think of Bill safeties, and I look back at like kind of I want to say the discourse around Poyer and Hyde, because a lot of people kind of had the understanding that these guys were high RAS guys, and they weren't. And not saying Makaba's the same thing, but what really made them win was, even without athleticism, they still had that processing ability. And I think even if it's not fully there with him yet, when he gets to the pros, like any team that, kind of, I guess, like in the case of Sean McDermott, has that DB's background and it's just developed them well, is going to love this kid, because again, it's just all those traits you described that I think for the original safeties you mentioned, he can bring that to the table. And just when I think of someone that I want in the safety room, it's someone that, again, just has the capability to not look out of place when he has to go deeper into the field, but also when they occasionally, because I'm hoping they do this season, can stat the box, bring their safeties a bit more up, just someone that plays with violence and has great processing, the instinct to shoot a gap, to be able to know where they got to be and not get blown off of that. And I think he has that. He's someone that I really, really like. Where do you honestly see him falling? Because I've seen people say he could climb into the 2nd, maybe go down to the 4th. I'm hoping the 4th, because maybe there's a chance they could get him then. But what's your opinion of him?
Yeah, I have Mukaba with a mid 3rd round grade. He's 78th on my board. My only hangup is just the size. I mean, 186 pounds for a safety is 3rd percentile. And, he's fearless. Like, for me to even consider him on day 2 at that size, like, he's got to have that mentality and just be fearless into run fits, which he definitely is. To me, like, just the range, the athleticism, the ball production. But it's not just like you look at his profile on ESPN and he has 5 interceptions or whatever. Like these are high quality plays on the ball where he's actually, creating turnovers and not just converting interceptions that are thrown right to him, like making some incredible reads and really, really skilled and precise at the catch point. So I think that's the kind of thing that can translate to the next level.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope he ends up a Bill, man. He's a lot of fun to watch. There's another player that you talked about size concerns. That's also fun. Billy Bowman. I just, again, like, I think it's 5'9", 192, which is just hilarious. And I think he would probably slot more as a slot, maybe nickel defender for a team. But I think he has the ability to go a little further on the field. But like you said, can you play above your size, or is it going to limit you? That I'd have to see. I just think he's a fun prospect. It's someone that I would keep on the radar in the late rounds. But James, that's really all I got. I mean, I will give you one last question before we sign off. And is there anything, let's just, for the sake of fan base that always wants receiver, even though we just got Josh Palmer, the receiver class is one that I have viewed as just kind of weak. There's players that I think can be serviceable to very limited roles, but not ones that I see being true stars outside, of course, like if Travis Hunter became full-time wide receiver, Ted McMillan, Luther Burden, even for me in the right system, could be someone who eats a lot in this league. But I guess just any wide receivers, maybe in the second, third round, someone a little further beyond the first that you like. I know, guys like Jalen Royals, Kyle Williams are names that pop up a lot. Who do you like?
Yeah, I'm a huge Kyle Williams fan. I've got him as a top 50 player. I think he's the best receiver in this class against press coverage. So he's somebody that it's like outside of having average size, I really think he checks every box as a prospect. So I would be comfortable spending a second round pick on him.
Oh, wow.
I think Torrey Horton is similarly just such a complete prospect. Like he's got the speed, he's got the change of direction ability. He doesn't drop passes. He has really good focus at the catch point. I think he's the best receiver in this class against zone coverage, not only at finding like the right spot to sit down, but then continuously repositioning himself to like stay aligned and like keep a wide open passing lane. Like I said, he's got the speed, but then he can slam on the brakes, decelerate on a dime, really productive after the catch. It's like, again, same thing with Kyle Williams. He doesn't have the ideal build. He is tall, but he's kind of slender and has shorter arms. So you worry about that a little bit. And then also had the injury this year, but I think he's an incredibly clean prospect that, both of those guys I see as high-end number 2 receivers.
Yeah, I know Anthony on our network is a big Torrey Horton fan, so he'd be elated to hear that. But listen, James, I appreciate your insight so much. I like to think I know things, but then I bring you on the show and just someone with your knowledge, and I realize that I know very little. You are impressive. You are a draft almanac, and the work speaks for itself. I want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody who watches the show, who listens, where they can find you, what you got going on, what to expect in your world.
Yeah, so I write for the 33rd team, post all my articles there on Twitter, at NoFlagsFilm. My pinned tweet is it has my draft board with all of my scouting reports up on there. So got it as like a pretty sleek web application. You can go and see all my thoughts on different guys. And then also have a YouTube channel. If you just search James Foster, it should be the first thing that pops up on YouTube. Have positional rankings for quarterback and running back up there, and got the rest of the positions coming soon.
Yes, definitely check that out before I continue on. Spin says, you all forgot the most important need for the Bills. What about punter? All of them did a great job, Spin. All of them did a great job. To be honest, I have not
haven't
looked at
watched
any.
A single punter. Couldn't tell you anything about them.
John Smith from whatever university. I'm a fan. No, in all seriousness, I'm sure they're going to find someone in the UDFA and they'll be fine with that. But again, James, just awesome stuff. it was so much fun speaking to you and learning more about these prospects. You know, I've done my start of my draft prep, but there's still a lot more I got to cover, and hearing how far along you are and how much you put out there just for everyone to see is really, really impressive and a lot of fun to keep up with. So thank you for lending your time to this show, you know, for the hour. I appreciate it immensely. And for all of you that checked us out tonight, thank you so much. Always appreciate your time. Thank you for joining our comment section. Thank you for being here. As always, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the conversation, drop a like. It means the world to not only me, but the members of our network. Subscribe to the One Pass. You can check that out in the description below. That is the lifeblood of our network. And for $60 a year, you have an opportunity to keep up with us at the network, join our Discord, and be able to get some awesome perks, including our partnership shirt with 26 shirts, which you should all check out. But be back next week to keep going on draft season. I anticipate a few more mock drafts, a few more discussions on the needs of this team. But for tonight, we will say good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And as always, go Bills. We will see you soon. Take care, everybody.